Young and the Restless spoilers. The crystal chandeliers of the Genoa City Athletic Club's ballroom cast a prism of fractured light across the faces of the city's elite. But for Carl Abbott, the brilliance felt like an interrogation lamp. The air was perfumed with expensive lilies and the metallic tang of chilled champagne, a sensory overload that did nothing to quell the nausea churning in his gut. This was supposed to be a night of triumph, grand launch of Abbott Communications. The gala had transformed into a cage. Carl stood near the periphery of the room, his hand gripping a crystal tumbler so tightly his knuckles had turned the color of bone. To his left stood Claire Grace, looking ethereal in a gown of midnight blue silk, yet her posture was rigid, a statue of ice. To his right, Audra Charles nursed a martini, her eyes darting between them with a predatory amusement that barely masked her own simmering frustration. "You're brooding, Carl," Audra murmured, her voice low and laced with that familiar, dangerous purr. "It doesn't suit the heir apparent aesthetic. People will talk." "Let them talk," Carl snapped, though he kept his voice hushed. He refused to look at Claire, afraid that if he met her gaze, he would see the pity that had crushed him only hours before. The memory of the afternoon was still a raw wound, the ring box snapping shut, the silence that stretched like a funeral shroud. "No, Carl. Not now. Not like this." The rejection hadn't been a simple no, it had been a dismantling of the desperate reality he had tried to construct since Summer left. He had tried to overwrite his history with Claire, tried to bury the ghost of his marriage under new promises, but Claire had seen right through him. "I'm just here to support the family," Claire said, her voice brittle. She took a sip of sparkling water, her eyes fixed on the podium where Billy was making final preparations. "Let's just get through the speeches, shall we?" "Support?" Audra scoffed softly, tilting her head. "Is that what we're calling it? I thought you were here to make sure I didn't claw my way back in while you were busy playing hard to get." "Enough," Carl warned, the word vibrating with suppressed rage. "Both of you. Just stop." Across the room, Billy Abbott adjusted the microphone, the feedback whine slicing through the murmur of the crowd. Beside him, Sally Spectra looked radiant in a structured emerald gown that screamed power and resilience. She placed a stabilizing hand on Billy's arm, a silent signal of unity that seemed to mock the fractured trio standing in the shadows. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests," Billy's voice boomed, commanding the room's attention. The chatter died down, replaced by the rustle of silk and the clinking of glass being set on coasters. Billy smiled, a practiced, charismatic expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Tonight isn't just about a company. It's about a voice." Abbott Communications was born from the idea that the truth matters, that connection matters. Sally stepped forward, her smile dazzling. "We are building a legacy," she added, her voice projecting confidence. "A platform where innovation meets integrity. We've faced challenges, certainly, doubters. But looking around this room tonight, seeing the support of our family and our community, I know that the vision Billy and I share is unbreakable." The applause was polite, rhythmic. Carl clapped mechanically, his mind drifting. He felt untethered. Without Summer, without Harrison, he had been drifting in a sea of bad decisions. Audra, the corporate wars, and now this ill-fated romance with Claire that was crumbling before it had truly begun. He felt a phantom weight in his arms, the memory of holding his son, the grounding force that had been ripped away when Summer took Harrison to Italy. "We are just getting started," Billy continued, his voice rising in a crescendo of corporate optimism. "The future of media in Genoa City is bright. It is bold. And it is right here, in this." The heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom didn't just open, they were thrown wide with a force that rattled the hinges. The sound echoed like a gunshot, severing Billy's sentence in midair. The room went dead silent. Heads turned in a synchronized wave, a sea of diamonds and tuxedos shifting toward the entrance. Framed by the doorway, illuminated by the hallway lights like an apparition, stood Summer Newman. She looked different. The Italian sun had bronzed her skin, and her hair was cut in a sharper, chaser style, but her eyes held a fierce, wary determination that Carl recognized instantly. But it wasn't Summer who stopped his heart. Clinging to her hand, looking small in a pressed little suit, was Harrison. A collective gasp rippled through the room, a sound like they are being sucked out of an airlock. The whispers started instantly, a low, buzzing hive of gossip. "Is that her? She's back. Look at the boy." Billy stood frozen at the podium, his mouth slightly open, the speech forgotten. Sally's hand dropped from his arm, her eyes widening as she calculated the implications of this interruption. For Kyle, the world narrowed down to a tunnel. The peripheral vision of the ballroom's glint of chandeliers, the faces of the board members, the accusing stare of Claire, the smirk falling from Audra's lips, all of it dissolved into gray static. There was only the boy. Harrison looked around the room with wide, frightened eyes until they landed on Kyle. The boy's face crumpled, a heartbreaking transition from confusion to recognition. "Daddy," Harrison's voice was small, barely a squeak, but to Kyle, it was louder than the thunder of applause. Kyle didn't think. He didn't breathe. The glass tumbler slipped from his fingers, crashing onto the marble floor and shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. Amber liquid splashed onto his dress shoes and the hem of Claire's gown, but Kyle was already moving. He broke into a run, shoving past a waiter with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, knocking a chair aside with a clatter that echoed in the silent room. Harrison, the name tore from his throat, raw and agonizing. Summer stepped forward, releasing Harrison's hand, and the boy sprinted. Kyle dropped to his knees in the center of the ballroom, sliding the last few feet on the polished floor, disregarding the dignity of the occasion, the stain on his knees, the hundreds of eyes watching him. Harrison slammed into him, small arms wrapping around Kyle's neck with a desperation that shattered whatever composure Kyle had left. Kyle buried his face in the boy's soft hair, inhaling the scent of baby shampoo and travel dust, a scent he had been terrified he would never smell again. "I've got you," Kyle choked out, tears spilling hot and fast down his cheeks. He squeezed his eyes shut, rocking the boy back and forth. "I've got you, buddy. Daddy's here." He felt a hand on his shoulder lighter, trembling. He looked up through the blur of tears to see Summer standing over them. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes were wet, filled with a complex mix of relief, exhaustion, and a lingering, guarded love. Kyle reached out, his hand trembling, and grasped Summer's waist, pulling her down into the embrace. It was an instinct, a muscle memory of a family unit that had been broken but never truly erased. Summer collapsed to her knees beside them, wrapping her arms around both Kyle and Harrison. For a long, suspended moment, they were an island in the middle of the ballroom. Kyle pressed his forehead against Summer's, their tears mingling, Harrison sandwiched safely between them. The politics of Jabot, the launch of Abbott Communications, the vendettas of Victor Newman, it all ceased to exist. There was only this. The reunion. The return of the air to his lungs. "I brought him home," Summer whispered, her voice cracking. "We're home, Kyle." "Thank you," Kyle sobbed, pulling them tighter, oblivious to the spectacle he was creating. "Thank God, thank you." 10 yards away, the spell of the moment did not extend to everyone. Claire Grace stood frozen, the champagne splash on her dress forgotten. She watched the tableau of the happy family with a face drained of color. The rejection of Kyle's proposal earlier that day had been painful, a necessary protective measure for her own heart, but seeing this was a confirmation of her deepest, darkest fear, that she had never been the destination, only a placeholder. She was the intermission in a play that had always been about Summer and Kyle. Her hands shook as she clutched her purse. She felt foolish, exposed. The way Kyle had looked at Summer, desperate, worshipful relief, was a look Claire had never received, not even in their most intimate moments. Beside her, Audra Charles was uncharacteristically silent. The smirk was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating mask. She watched Kyle on his knees, a man who had sworn he was done with the past, now literally bowing before it. Audra took a slow, deliberate sip of her martini, her eyes narrowing. She saw the writing on the wall. The chaos she had thrived on, the triangulation she had orchestrated between herself, Kyle, and Claire, had just been rendered irrelevant by a much more potent force, history. "Well," Audra whispered, her voice slicing through the tension near them, sharp enough for Claire to hear. "I suppose that answers the question of where his loyalty lies. Doesn't it, darling?" Claire didn't respond. She simply turned on her heel, her eyes burning with tears, and pushed her way through the crowd, desperate for the exit, desperate for air. Back at the podium, Billy Abbott leaned into the microphone, trying to salvage the hijacked narrative of the evening, but his words were lost. The room wasn't looking at the logo of Abbott Communications projected on the screen. They were watching the resurrection of a family, and the storm clouds gathering over the heartbroken women left in its wake. Kyle didn't care. He didn't see Claire leave. He didn't see Audra's glare. He only felt the small heartbeat against his chest and the familiar warmth of Summer's hand in his hair. The party was over, but for Carl Abbott, life had just restarted. The silence in the Abbott mansion was usually comforting, a velvet blanket of history and privilege, but today it felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the fine hairs on Carl Abbott's arms stand on end. He paced the length of the parlor, his Italian loafers making no sound on the antique Persian rug. Every few seconds, his eyes darted to the grand entrance, his heart hammering a rhythm that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the little boy who had been absent from his life for far too long. Weeks. It had been weeks since the custody dispute had escalated, resulting in Summer taking Harrison on an extended vacation to clear the air, a move that had felt more like a kidnapping to Carl's frayed nerves. The legalities were a mess, a tangled web of restraining orders and visitation rights that had left him staring at empty photo frames in Harrison's bedroom. But today, they were back. The heavy oak door creaked open. The sound was followed immediately by the patter of small, energetic feet. "Daddy." The voice was a balm to a wound Carl hadn't realized was festering. He spun around, dropping to one knee just as a blur of energy launched itself into his arms. The impact knocked the breath out of him, but he didn't care. He buried his face in Harrison's soft hair, inhaling the scent of baby shampoo and the vague, dusty smell of travel. "Harrison," Carl choked out, his voice thick with emotion. He squeezed the boy tight, his eyes squeezing shut to hold back the sudden sting of tears. "I missed you, buddy. I missed you so much." Harrison pulled back, his face beaming with the unadulterated joy that only a child could possess. "I missed you too, Daddy. We went on a big airplane. And I saw a boat." Carl laughed, a ragged sound, and smoothed the hair back from his son's forehead. He looked over Harrison's shoulder to see Summer standing in the doorway. She looked impeccable as always, dressed in a sharp, cream-colored trench coat that shielded her from the Genoa city chill. But there was a tightness around her eyes, a guardedness in her posture that Carl recognized instantly. They locked eyes for a brief, frosty moment before Carl turned his attention back to the most important person in the room. "You saw a boat?" Carl asked, keeping his voice light, masking the tension he felt at Summer's presence. "Did you go sailing?" "Yes. And we had gelato every day," Harrison chirped, his hands animating the story with wild gestures. "And we went to the park with the big fountain. And my special friend pushed me on the swings really high. Higher than Mommy does." Carl's smile faltered slightly. He tilted his head, confusion furrowing his brow. "Your special friend." He glanced at Summer. She was busy removing her gloves, her movements jerky and precise, avoiding his gaze. "Yeah," Harrison continued, oblivious to the shift in the room's atmosphere. "He's really strong. He carried me when I got tired walking up the big hill. He said he knows you, Daddy, but he couldn't come say hi today." The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Carl felt a cold prickle of unease crawl up his spine. "He knows me," Carl repeated, his voice lower now. He looked at his son, trying to keep his expression neutral. "What's his name, Harrison?" "His name is Harrison, sweetie." Summer's voice cut through the air, sharp and overly bright. She stepped forward quickly, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floor as she closed the distance between them. "Why don't you go find Mrs. Martinez? I bet she has those cookies you love. The chocolate chip ones." Harrison's eyes widened. "Cookies?" "Go on," Summer urged, placing a hand on his shoulder and gently steering him toward the kitchen. "Tell her we're home." Harrison hesitated, looking between his parents, sensing the sudden shift but easily swayed by the promise of sugar. "Okay. Bye, Daddy." He scrambled off, his laughter trailing behind him as he vanished into the hallway. Carl stood up slowly, the warmth of the reunion evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard suspicion. He turned to face Summer. She was busy adjusting the strap of her handbag, refusing to look at him. "A special friend?" Carl asked, his voice flat. "Who was he talking about? Summer?" Summer finally looked up, her expression a mask of feigned nonchalance. "Oh, honestly, Carl, it's just someone we met. A friend of a friend in Milan. Harrison just got attached. You know how he is." "He said this friend knows me," Carl pressed, stepping closer. "And that he helped you a lot. Carried Harrison up hills. Pushed him on swings. That sounds like more than just a casual acquaintance you met at a cafe. You're reading too much into it, Summer snapped, a flush rising on her neck. He's a child. He exaggerates. It was just a colleague from Marchetti who helped us out with logistics. I didn't want to handle all the luggage and a tired 4-year-old by myself. So why did you cut him off? Kyle challenged, his eyes narrowing. He was about to say the name. Because I didn't want to stand here and listen to a 4-year-old ramble about a stranger when we have actual things to discuss, Summer deflected, crossing her arms defensively. Like the custody schedule. Or are we just going to ignore the fact that you tried to block me from taking him in the first place? Kyle didn't take the bait. He watched her, really watched her. He knew Summer. He knew her tells. The way her fingers drummed against her arm, the way she shifted her weight from foot to foot. She was lying. Or at the very least, she was hiding something significant. I'm not talking about the schedule right now, Kyle said quietly. I'm talking about the fact that my son spent weeks with a man I don't know, a man you're clearly trying to keep secret. There's no secret, Summer cried, her voice pitching up. God, you are so paranoid. Is this what it's going to be like? Every time I leave the house, you're going to interrogate me. When my son comes home talking about a special friend who played father figure while I was stuck here. Yes, I'm going to ask questions, Kyle shot back, his temper flaring. He turned away from her, walking toward the fireplace, needing to put distance between them before he said something he regretted. He stared into the cold hearth, his mind racing. It wasn't just the special friend, it was everything. The last few months had been a relentless series of blows. The dissolution of his marriage to Summer had been painful enough, a slow-motion car crash of resentment and betrayal. But the aftermath had been worse. He had tried to move on. He had tried to find stability, to build something new. His mind flashed back to Claire. The memory was fresh, a stinging bruise on his ego. He could still see the look in Claire's eyes when he had asked her to marry him. He had been so sure, so desperate to anchor himself to something pure and good after the toxicity of his relationship with Summer. Claire was everything Summer wasn't, gentle and tainted by the Newman Abbott wars, or so he had thought. I can't call, she had said, her voice trembling. It's too soon. You're doing this for the wrong reasons. Rejection, cold and absolute. He had thrown himself into that proposal, believing it was the solution, the way to prove to everyone, especially Summer, that he was fine, that he was moving forward. Instead, he had been left standing alone, holding a ring box that felt like a lead weight. And now this. While he had been here, licking his wounds, trying to navigate the humiliation of Claire's refusal and the emptiness of the mansion, Summer had been out there, living a life he knew nothing about, building a world for Harrison that didn't include him. Who is he, Summer? Kyle asked again, turning back to face her. His voice was softer now, but laced with a dangerous determination. Harrison said he helped you a lot. That implies intimacy. That implies reliance. Summer sighed, running a hand through her hair. He was just a support system, Kyle. I was alone in a foreign country. It was nice to have someone, kind. Someone who didn't judge me or try to take my son away. Is he the reason you stayed away so long? Kyle asked, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Did you extend the trip for him? Summer's eyes widened, and for a second, he saw panic. No, of course not. I stayed for work. For Marchetti. You're lying, Kyle said, the certainty settling in his gut like a stone. I'm done with this conversation, Summer declared, grabbing her purse. I brought Harrison home. He's safe. He's happy. That's all that should matter to you. I'm going to check on him and then I'm leaving. She brushed past him, a cloud of expensive perfume and nervous energy. Kyle didn't try to stop her. He watched her walk toward the kitchen, her shoulders tense, her stride quick. She was running. Kyle looked back at the empty doorway where Harrison had stood moments ago. The boy's innocent words echoed in his mind. My special friend. It wasn't just a colleague. A colleague didn't make a child light up like that. A colleague didn't make Summer Newman, the queen of composure, look like a deer in headlights. A dark thought crossed Kyle's mind. What if this wasn't just a new boyfriend? Harrison had said the man knew him. Who would Summer be with that she needed to hide so desperately? Who would have access to Harrison, gain his trust, and yet remain in the shadows? The seeds of doubt, planted by a 4-year-old's chatter, were taking root rapidly, twisting into thorny vines of suspicion. Kyle walked over to the side table and poured himself a drink, his hand trembling slightly. He downed the amber liquid in one burn, the warmth doing nothing to thaw the ice in his chest. He wasn't going to let this go. Summer thought she could breeze back into town, drop off their son, and gloss over the weeks of silence with a smile and a deflection. She was wrong. He had lost his wife. He had been rejected by Claire. He felt his grip on his son slipping, fingers prying him away one by one. He was backed into a corner, and the Abbotts were never more dangerous than when they were cornered. He set the glass down with a sharp clink. He would find out who this special friend was. He would tear apart every itinerary, every credit card statement, every phone record if he had to. If Summer was bringing someone dangerous into Harrison's life, or if she was planning to replace him as a father, he would burn the world down to stop it. The reunion was over. The war had just begun.